Good evening, sports fans, and welcome to the new year 2023. I am Brian Kress, the Awesome Voice. Across from me is Coach 24, Darwin Penny. Happy New Year, brother. How you doing?
Happy New Year. We're doing well. We're excited for what 2023 holds.
Yeah, absolutely. And behind the scenes and running the show, DJ Scatter, George Walker. How are you doing, sir?
Everything's going super fantastic this evening.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we've got a lot to talk about tonight. We had a show last week. Unfortunately, you wasn't here, so I had to run the show. And sometimes when I run the show by myself, I miss you badly. I just have to say that. So I am so glad that you're here and just having I just enjoy doing the show with you.
Absolutely. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Absolutely. So, and speaking of teamwork, Monday night when Dalmar Hamlin was laying on that ground, there was a lot of teamwork and a lot of people that did some amazing things to get him off the field and to the hospital and taken care of, to where today he is at least responding.
Absolutely. There's a thing that we who have been in many different arenas, anytime that you're responsible for a facility, there's a thing called emergency action plan. And you go over it and you drill it and you try to prepare yourselves for it, hoping, like insurance, you never have to use it. But yes, Monday was a testament to the people, to the Bills, first their staff, for being able to get out there and quickly assess what's going on, and then to be able to work in conjunction with the medical team there at the stadium to be able to make some decisive moves. Never had I seen, I'm pretty sure that we have not seen, somebody actually have to have CPR performed on the field. What we have been used to is some big hits where players have been carried off stretchers. I remember as a kid Darryl Stingley being paralyzed at the game. I remember Mike Utley for Detroit, Ryan Shazier, guys who had lost feeling in an extremity or maybe their lower half. But always when they carted off, you looked for the thumbs up. Right. That became our thing with broken bones, things like that. Certainly not of that magnitude, but we remember 2020, Dak Prescott, his foot is going the wrong way, and we can see it. But he's going off in the thumbs up. But what you saw there was something that no parent, no coach, no teammate, no family member, not even anybody in the stands wants to see is a player down and unresponsive. And so we're so thankful for what we've heard today and how he has progressed. but it showed the human frailty that we have, the dangers associated with the game on what didn't seem like a vicious hit by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
We've seen way worse. And people get up and walk from it. And, obviously he initially did get to his feet, but then immediately collapsed after that. And so to go into cardiac arrest there, just your hats goes off to everybody associated with getting him the treatment, because anytime you go into cardiac arrest, those first 10 minutes are crucial. And to be able to sustain get his heart back in rhythm. And then so there's not a huge loss of oxygen, and able to now transport him where he could get the best medical attention.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, that's the one thing that I can say about professional sports, whether it's basketball, baseball, football, whatever. They have the best medical staff. I mean, that's one thing that you can get taken care of. You may not get treated well, because you may get cut, blah, blah, blah. But if you're injured or you're hurt or the situation like Monday night, they will be out there and they will get the best treatment around. So, and thank goodness for that. The ironic thing is when he finally awoken, Adam Schefter said something like he wrote down the first thing that he thought of, and it was, did we win? And when I was watching that game Monday night, I was realizing what was going on. There was not a good situation. They did a phenomenal job of surrounding him. So no cameras. Usually if you see a broken leg, you can get a camera, sneak in there. You couldn't see nothing, and that was awesome. So I was sitting there watching, but my mind, the NFL has got us so committed to the football. Every once in a while, I was like, okay, are we going to play football? And I had to stop to go, wait, this is much more important than what's going on. But you have that mindset though, because you're sitting there watching it, and you see two teams, the best teams. This has a lot of effect and all that, and you have to realize that with life like that, and I got it, I understand, but every once in a while that football mentality came back.
Well, first of all, we did not have a precedent where a game had been stopped completely because of an injury. Maybe lightning, loss of power with the lights. There's a whole lot of things that we've encountered, but not where somebody heart had stopped beating on the field, and you could see how visibly shaken players on both teams were. These were grown men that were crying and obviously weeping that their friend was down, and all of a sudden, and then for a split second, once they were able to get him in the ambulance and move off, our minds then shifted to, okay, when will the game resume? That doesn't make anybody any less concerned, but because of precedent, the games had always gone on.
Right.
But again, we were at a first time where somebody's heart actually stopped. And so what do you do? And, it was a difficult situation. There's a lot of people, having coached high school football before, I'd had a situation where a young man had compound fracture, breaking his leg. And I remember it happened right in front of me. He's on the other team. I immediately, once the play stopped, go out, place my hand in his hands, and I just said, hold on, young man, hold on. And I know it's bad. I can see it. The only thing that kept me from seeing his leg was because he had on full-length socks.
Oh.
And as his coach came over there, I'm trying to remain calm to keep this young man calm.
Right.
And I said it in a low voice, get the ambulance over here. And the coach was kind of, And the good thing is that Coach and I knew each other.
Right.
And he looked in my eyes, and I said, "Get the ambulance, please. We're wasting time."
Yeah.
We were playing in a small country town where there was no hospital.
Ooh.
They had to take him 30 miles.
Oh,
Once
wow.
once they secured his leg, they had to take him 30 miles, then get him in it wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious because it's a compound fracture that needs to be dealt with. And they had to put him on a helicopter to fly him to San Antonio, Texas, so that they could do immediate surgery on him.
Oh, wow.
Now, the next year we finished the game that night, obviously.
Right.
But what I had to do at halftime was my player who had made the tackle, I had to get him back in a mindset where he could play football.
Right.
Because you did nothing wrong, son.
Right.
It was an accident. And that's what most of those players are looking at when they go into these situations. It's part of the game, but this had gone to an unprecedented level. And now I remember having to tell a young man, you got to try to go and play. Well, now how do you get all of these guys to clear their mind, because you know their mind is with their teammate,
Right.
or even with their opponent. Some of those guys on the other team went to college with him. Where is your mind? And now we've got to make sure that everybody's safe, because as we know, playing football, if your mind is not engaged, somebody could get hurt seriously.
Absolutely.
With it being a full contact sport. So like I said, then all of the implications now are going around. You know, there's a first round bye at stake. You know, there's home field throughout. All of these
Right.
things that are potentially at stake. But what is more important right now? And I don't know. The competition committee is meeting as we speak to try to figure out what do you do. Because for me, you can't replay the game
Right.
if you didn't play the game within the 2 days afterwards.
Right.
Which, you know, I called a dear friend of mine and said, "Okay, you're commissioner for the day. What do you do?"
Right. And, you know, I don't blame them if they don't play this game, but unlike a high school game, it would have just been canceled. That part was easily, but when you have billions of dollars going around, and I know people are not going to like what I'm going to say, but there are people out there who have gambled, who's people who had fantasy football teams and all this, and they're like, wait a minute, I had a chance to win. You know, they weren't sitting there on the field or in the stands or on the sidelines watching this guy struggle for his life, because usually a player, once he gives the thumbs up, that it's almost like a mechanism for the other athletes to say, okay, let's go. It never happened. So that part they were waiting for never came. So they were still in question for 2 days. I mean, it was Wednesday, and he still didn't know how he was going. It was, I believe, late in the evening last night that he even responded. So you have guys that, you know, they're waiting for that click, and that click never happened. And then you're still trying to get them to go back out to do something that has never happened, really. I mean, it happened in 1971. Yeah, there was a player that died, but he was actually responding, and he was awake. This guy was out. There was no response on him. You know, they were performing CPR for 10 minutes to get him going, just enough so they could get him in the ambulance.
Absolutely.
Because if you put him in there too soon, it would have been tragic.
You know, as somebody who is certified CPR every year, you have got to try to get a pulse, and you've got to try to get a heartbeat before you do anything else. And so if that means working on that person for 20 plus minutes, you do that to try to get something. So now that they can add oxygen and all these other things to now try to transport, but you don't want to transport until you can at least get the heart beating, and then maybe if you can get some type of response, because you as a respondent are depending on the information that the person hurt is giving you or not giving you.
Right.
So And that's the way you've got to handle that situation. And so, for me, if you did not play the game within the 48 hours immediately after the game, then to me, there's no way to play the game unless you push the whole season back.
Right.
At this point, at least a week. I thought there's a couple of precedents that I thought you could have possibly utilized. Obviously, in 2020, we had outbreaks of COVID where we had to adjust schedule and move games back. But you've got to have at least 4 days between games before they legally can play a game again. And so you could do that. I thought also about 9/11 and how we responded and did that, or you can go all the way back to 1963 when President Kennedy was assassinated, and how they stopped the games and they postponed all games for a week. And so
now I heard that they did not. I heard in one story that they continued on playing even after his assassination.
Well,
I've heard both ways.
I think that first week in, because when he played, but we'll have to do a little bit of fact checking on that. But at the end of the day, what are you going to do?
Right.
But to me, COVID was the best thing that we could have utilized to say this is how we can proceed by pushing back a day or two.
Right.
To give everybody what you just want, a fair playing field.
Right.
And so now what do you do? There's all kind of talks of, just call it a tie and both teams, or I heard one guy, Adam Schefter, today said that there should be a coin flip between the two teams, and one team says you can either pick a bye or you could pick home field throughout once they play the games this weekend.
Right.
Because there's so many implications, and then our hometown team is caught up in the middle of it too.
Yeah.
And
technically, Baltimore is caught up in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And New England, in an indirect way, is caught up in it because now they got to play Buffalo this week. They have to win to get in.
Right.
And if they don't,
which that was going to happen regardless.
Right.
But the main thing I was looking at was home field.
Right.
The seeding is right now the bigger thing. But yeah, you would hate for somebody to lose out on a playoff spot,
right,
as a result. But they were going to have to play their way in regardless.
Right.
So, but if Buffalo wins out, they're the number one seed.
Right.
Both of those teams had a vested interest in that game because both of those teams beat the Chiefs this year.
Exactly.
So if Kansas City were to inherit because of a tie, the number one seed,
right,
some people would feel some kind of way about it.
Right. But at the same time, Kansas City is involved without being involved. So if they win Saturday, they beat the Raiders. And I was about ready to say Oakland, but they beat the Raiders. Technically they'll have the best record because if they go by Cincinnati and Buffalo going with a tie, then that means that Kansas City has the better winning record and
they would have a better percentage because they would have one more victory, even though they would be even in the loss with Buffalo.
Right, exactly.
So that's so I think all of that has to be taken into consideration whenever they try to figure this out, because what you do want is it to be equitable, and let's just say they don't play the game, and if I'm Buffalo and I've got the same number of losses as Kansas City and I beat them head to head, I want that to count for something.
Right. And see, here's the other thing. Let's just say, okay, I'm going to be the commissioner. So we're going to take week 19 and just play Buffalo at Cincinnati. Now, the NFC will continue on going as what they're as planned because there's nothing to alter their situation. So you have Buffalo and Cincinnati. They play that game, and then the winner decides. Let's just say Buffalo wins. Let's just say Buffalo, Cincinnati, and Kansas City wins this weekend. And then you go week 19, Buffalo and Cincinnati. Winner of that game, and I'm going to go with Cincinnati just based on the fact that they were up 7-3. So I'll just say they finished the game. They won 7-3. So they will go on, and then they will continue, and then the next week they will go. And you know, you want to be fair, but in a point, the only thing was fair was making sure that Hamlin was going to be alive and be able to, that he was okay. So everything else you try to do as fair as possible, because let's just say Kansas City ended up getting the number 1 seed, and they did that. Well, they would do 2 weeks because they would be off 19, and then they would be off week 20, and then they would play after everybody else. You know, would that hurt them? Well, having 1 week off is good. Last year, Tennessee found out that, you know, it didn't benefit them. But to have 2 weeks off would really hurt that.
Yeah.
So what do you see? You're the commissioner. What would you do?
I would have had to do the hardest thing ever is within 48 hours. I would have finished that game, just because of so many implications that were there. You don't finish it that night, but I would have said, please, players, don't leave Cincinnati. Let's figure out before we let you get on a plane as to how we're going to finish this game. Now, once I've gotten past that, then I'm going to I probably make a phone call and appeal to the Chiefs about backing into the number 1 seed if I call this game a tie. How do y'all feel about it? You know, if they're dogmatic and say, no, well, we want it, you know,
right?
Then I say, okay, well, then I'm going to have to make it fair for Buffalo in some kind of way. I've got to make it fair for them. I can't make it fair for Cincinnati because you had 4 losses.
Right.
Buffalo has 3 losses, but I've got to make it fair for them some kind of way where they get some kind of, you know, maybe what Schefter talked about. You get the bye, but they get the home field if they play you in the playoffs because they beat you head to head.
You know, like you said, no matter what answer is given, and obviously we're not the commissioners, but whatever Roger Goodell decides, it's still somebody is going to be happy and somebody is going to be sad or mad. And, you know, it's just going to happen that way. And so
unless you just redo the entire schedule and not have the extra week in between the Super Bowl, and you got to, you know, just say, hey, here's where we are. Everybody's going to get a little bit of a breather until we can get this game played. But you know,
right.
that's billions of dollars with tickets and people and plans and all of that.
Right.
You know, and so there's no easy way once you got outside of that 48-hour window. And right now, I think the only thing that you can do is call it a tie.
Right.
And at that point, my next thing would probably be to then play this week, see what happens, because there are no guarantees this week.
Right.
And at that point, then if everything goes as well, and because they're a half game behind Kansas City, then I have to come and talk to the Chiefs and appeal to them and just say, okay, you can get the seeding or you can get the bye. Which do you want?
Yeah.
And Buffalo gets the other. I don't know.
Yeah. So what do you think, Mr. Walker?
Mr. Walker said,
and it is, and that's why I guess Roger Goodell makes $50 million a year. So
the right thing is always right.
Right.
Okay. But sometimes it's not hard. It's hard getting to the right decision.
Right. Well, it's like raising a child. Sometimes you got to do things that are unpopular and not good and makes the child angry, but you're doing it to benefit them, and this way you're trying to benefit everybody, but you're not gonna benefit everybody, because let's just say I'm in a group with 100 people and I make a decision and 99% of them say okay, but there's always going to be that one that's going to hate your decision.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you can't make everybody happy.
No, you can't. So saying this, this weekend you got the Raiders and you got the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
And now the Raiders got rid of Derek Carr. They've got Stidham in there. And, yes, he performed well against 49ers, but I think to a point 49ers didn't completely prepare for him because, I mean, yeah, they have arguably the number one defense in the NFL, but they didn't play like they had the number one defense. But I think with the Chiefs, I think they have a shot, because now they've had over a week to realize who's going to be the quarterback, who's going to run the show, everything else. What do you see in that?
Well, obviously, I want to hit a little bit on Derek Carr.
Okay.
First of all, I think Derek Carr is getting the bad end of the deal in this whole situation.
Mm-hmm.
The instability of the Raiders organization has not allowed this young man to reach his full potential. He's had to deal with 6 head coaches in the time that he's been there. He's dealt with at least that many offensive coordinators. And then this year, really having a guy who didn't want him as his quarterback. When you go back and you look at Derek Carr has been a very solid NFL quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
He's not elite on the Mahomes level, but a solid NFL quarterback. Every year throws for at least 4,000 yards. He's gone out. You take away really his rookie year, and you look at some pretty favorable stats for a guy who's had to go up against all of this instability within an organization. He's had to deal with a coach that had to be let go, coaches that have been fired, coaches that quit, the whole 9 yards. And so somebody's got to be the fall guy. And right now he's being the fall guy, and he's being the fall guy over money.
Right.
They don't want to pay him the $40 million, and so they can basically buy his contract out if he doesn't get hurt over the next 2 weeks for $5 million.
Right.
And so it came down to a money thing. But his coach, who, he had this Stidham kid in New England, and so he brought him there.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like I feel bad for Derek Carr. I felt like Derek Carr's whole career, he's had to answer for issues that his brother had, David Carr, right? And not living up to being the number one pick in Houston, but he had a lot of instability too, and was thrown into the fire as a rookie. Never got a chance to learn, the game, and it's hard to play that position.
Yeah, and he was sacked more times in his period than any other quarterback.
Right. And so he was gun shy, right? And so he had to deal with that, and so all of a sudden this year, Carr gets probably, he played banged up last year. He was a little bit hurt this year. And that's the other thing is sometimes your best asset is availability. This guy has been durable over his career. He's missed a couple of games his whole career, and yet he's being thrown out to the wolves. And so he'll resurface and be somebody's quarterback next year. Houston's looking, so
I'm not sure Houston's going to be doing that.
They probably go to draft.
Yep.
But it's just all those things, and so at the end of the day, I think Kansas City will handle this game just like they always have. They're going to be professional, and the Raiders' defense is going to get eaten up. I mean, that's another thing that the Raiders have done, right? They gave away the best defensive pass rusher they had. It's been ineptness, but yet you're going to hold one man accountable for that, and then try to get off the money off of it.
Well, as you always say, it's the Raiders. It's that one uncle or that one cousin that always seems to find a way that you've got easy street right there, and you find a way to just trip all over yourself, and that's what the Raiders do.
Absolutely.
And I have never been a big Josh McDaniel fan at all. I mean, is he he's a good offensive coordinator. But that was because he had
Tom Brady.
Yeah, he had Tom Brady. That's why I said good, not great. And he is a horrible head coach.
We've got two examples of it. Right, and so he hadn't done a very good job as a head coach, and so again, but that's a subject that I really don't want to get into it. How these guys continually get jobs, and then you got a guy like Bieniemy who never gets his first job. So let's just look at that situation. And so at the end of the day, I think the Chiefs are also hitting a stride. They found great use in McKinnon over the last 3 to 4 weeks. He's been a great asset to the offense where Mahomes can get the ball out, especially when people are using the Tampa 2 coverage on them and trying to get him to check down. Well, you got to have something to check down too.
Right.
And I think he's done that. I think they found a little bit of a spurt in the running game with Pacheco. And so now they've got a little bit of two-headed monster where both of those guys have something that they're bringing to the table in the backfield. And then the defense is starting to really shore up its run defense. That's always been a big fear of mine, is the Chiefs' run defense and not being able to stop the run. And so I think they'll go out and they'll handle their business because they got a lot to be playing for. And the Raiders are just dealing with a lot of like that. I'm going to be surprised at what happens with Devontae Adams because of how close he and Carr are. They were being college teammates, and that was the reason why he was willing to leave Aaron Rodgers and the Packers is to go play with his college teammate. Right. And now you're going to get rid of this guy. What do you think Devontae's going to do?
Well, but this past weekend it looked like he didn't care because he just wanted somebody to throw him the ball, and he threw him the ball, and he made some incredible catches. And so to me, that doesn't seem like somebody that's kind of got an edge, and because his buddy is benched and not showing up.
Right.
So
I can finish the season, but that don't mean I got to come back.
Well, that's true too. So with that, we're going to take a break. We're at halftime on Any Given Sunday. We'll be back shortly, and we'll have some other discussions. We still have Penny for your thoughts, and who do you think is going to make it to the Hall of Fame? Okay, we are back for the second half of Any Given Sunday. Coach 24, Darwin Penny, George Walker, DJ Scatter behind the scenes, and I'm Brian Kress, the Awesome Voice. And we were just sitting here discussing. We've already talked about Hamlin, and we could keep talking about him for the next 3 days, but we're going to change the subject, and we're going to go to the Hall of Fame the people who made the Hall of Fame. There's a list of 15 plus a couple of other guys on there. So you've got Darrell Rivas, Joe Thomas, Willie Anderson, who was a offensive tackle for the Cincinnati Bengals, Terry Holt from the Rams, Reggie Wayne from the Colts, Andre Johnson, who was mainly with the Houston Texans, Jared Allen, a Chief and Viking, DeMarcus Ware, a Cowboy, Dwight Feeney, the Indianapolis, Albert Lewis, who is kind of the old school guy. He's still in there. Cornerback for the Chiefs. Rondé Barber, cornerback for the Tampa Bay Bucks. Devin Hester, the cornerback and special team specialist. Then you have Zach Thomas, middle linebacker for the Miami Dolphins. Patrick Willis of the 49ers. And Darren Woodson of the Dallas Cowboys. So, saying that, and I know that you have.
And let me throw in the guys who are the modern era senior finalists.
Okay.
Chuck Howley, longtime Dallas Cowboy linebacker. Joe Klecko, defensive lineman for the Jets for many, many years.
Yep.
Ken Riley, who was a defensive back for the Bengals.
Yeah, in the 70s and 80s.
Right. And then as a contributor coach, Don Coryell. Longtime Chargers, and prior to that, Cardinals coach.
Okay.
So these are the guys who are senior finalists.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's pick 5 from the 15 and then 1 from the 4 on the senior. Mm-hmm. So you go first.
All right. For me, I'm going to start with Devin Hester, punt returner, kick returner, wide receiver. As a return specialist, there's nobody better. Mm-mm. There was one return guy who is already in the Hall of Fame as a cornerback.
Right.
Oh, Mr. Sanders, Deion, Coach Prime.
Right.
Who could rival that, but Devin did it on a game-for-game basis. Deion would just from time to time jump back there.
Right.
But this guy was a game changer, was a field changer. Even in a Super Bowl, was able to run a kickback. And so he would be my first guy on that list. Joe Thomas, consummate all-pro left tackle. You want that guy protecting your blind side. When Cleveland had nothing to cheer about, you could cheer about Joe Thomas. Okay. There's a good group of receivers here. Certainly Torrey Holt put up some pretty decent numbers. We've got Reggie Wayne, who was a mainstay with the Colts. But for me, the guy who was played on some poor teams, Andre Johnson. Andre Johnson was a beast. I got a chance to see him up close and personal living in Houston all those years when he had probably 10 different quarterbacks, and he was just consistently going out and putting numbers. When you didn't have anything else to cheer for that expansion franchise, Andre Johnson was the consummate pro there. DeMarcus Ware, linebacker, outside rusher for the Cowboys, during a semi-down period for the Cowboys. He finished up in Denver, where he was a part of a Super Bowl winning Broncos team late in his career. But he is in the top 10 all-time in sacks. And so just great edge rusher, difference maker there. What is that, 4? Or is that 5?
Nope, you got one more.
I got one more. Man, that's the hard one, and I'm trying not to go with my heart, and you know who my heart is, but I'm going to go with it, and everybody just be mad at me. I'm going to go with Darren Woodson, safety of the Cowboys. He was the back end of that Cowboys secondary for over a decade. Most people would agree that the Cowboys are one of the premier franchises. Mm-hmm. He was a part of their best dynasty. He is the all-time leading tackler for the Dallas Cowboys. That's saying a lot. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So, I'm surprised that it has taken this long. But he didn't have a lot of interceptions. But what he was a tackler and made big plays when he had to. But just a leader, defensive leader on that dynasty from 92, 94, a guy who was a linebacker in college who wound up playing safety in the NFL. So those would be my five, and it was hard for me not to pick Darrelle Revis.
Yeah. Well, I think Darrelle Revis is very good, but I think he will make it in like the second or third time around because Darrelle Revis, Joe Thomas, and Dwight Freeney is the first timers. Mm-hmm. And so I picked Joe Thomas too. I mean, you had 10,000 consecutive snaps until he tore his knee and was gone, and then he retired. But he was already there 10 years, and he was you talk about reliability, as you said, that's reliability. I went with Reggie Wayne because I think he was the second guy with Marvin Harrison with the Colts, but after Harrison retired, he took over the number one and still led Indianapolis, or helped them lead to another Super Bowl. I have Devin Hester, obviously, just phenomenal. I truly enjoyed watching him. Chiefs fans, it's kind of like watching Dante Hall, except for this guy was much, much, much better. And I agree with Darren Woodson. I think he should belong in there. And then my fifth pick is Albert Lewis because I watched him in the 80s and up to the early 90s before he left to go to Oakland. And he was the best cornerback. And at that time, even when the Chiefs did not have a great team, they always talked about the four defensive backs, Lloyd Burris, Kevin Ross, Deron Cherry, and Albert Lewis. And they were phenomenal. If they would have had a front seven to go with that, you can imagine where they would go. Now, saying that, okay.
I want you to listen to this
Okay.
at how close it is, especially with Reggie Wayne, Andre Johnson.
Okay.
Reggie Wayne, 1,070 receptions.
Okay.
14,345 yards, 82 touchdowns.
Okay.
Okay. Andre Johnson, 1,062 catches.
Okay.
14,185 yards and 70 touchdowns.
Oh, wow.
And one of them played with a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Right. Yeah. And the other one played with David Carr.
amongst others, and
Right.
Matt Schaub and
Yep.
I think I threw a pass to him once.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Now, we've talked about the five. Now, give me the list again. Hallie, Ken Riley, Joe Klecko, and who was the fourth one again?
Was Don Coryell as a contributor coach. I'm man, I believe that Chuck Howley should have been in long time ago.
Yep. The only MVP on a losing team
in the Super Bowl.
In Super Bowl history.
But when you look at his accomplishments, I mean, he was an outstanding all-pro caliber guy. So he's a six-time Pro Bowler, five-time All-Pro.
Yeah.
Super Bowl MVP, Super Bowl champ. So he would be my guy on that list. Man, but it is hard for me because of the impact and what we look at passing in the game today with what Don Coryell was doing light years ahead of everybody else with how they were able to spread the field with Air Coryell. And, man, that you talking about a contribution to the game. He opened up, I mean, next to the forward pass.
Yep.
I mean,
yeah,
it's pretty,
absolutely.
Between that and what Bill Walsh was able to do with the West Coast offense, those things were huge. And what Tom Landry did to defenses and creating the 4-3 defense.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, you look at what he had in San Diego. He had Dan Fouts. He had Chuck Muncie. He had Jefferson. He had Charlie Joyner. And he had Kellen Winslow. And Kellen Winslow is the 1980s version of Travis Kelce.
Absolutely.
And he was the bomb. I mean, even Kellen Winslow would block field goals. I mean, he still has that game that everybody talks about in Miami. Mm-hmm. So my choices are in between Eric Coryell and Ken Riley, because I used to watch him play all the time, and even though they would lose to Pittsburgh, he would always have a phenomenal game, and he would always be up against Lynn Swann and have those great games. I've got to go Eric Coryell.
All right, 65 career interceptions is a lot.
Yes, because the record is 81 by Paul Krause. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
So that's a pretty impressive resume.
Well, and Joe Klecko was what you would say the Dean Martin to what Mark Gastineau was the Jerry Lewis, because he was the showboater and everything, but Joe Klecko just was a workman, just the blue pail guy.
So when I look at and I threw those numbers out there, 4 times a Pro Bowler, 2 All-Pros, whereas Chuck Howley was 6 times a Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro.
Right.
So.
Yep. So. And now, how many All-Pros did Ken Riley have?
Ken Riley was an All-Pro once.
Okay. So that's why I picked Coryell, because what he did transcended to today's game, and he did that 40 years ago.
Yes.
So, absolutely. And he started out with the Cardinals.
Yes.
The St. Louis Cardinals, not the
St. Louis Cardinals.
Not the Arizona.
That's right. Jim Hart, Mel Gray, Terry Metcalf, because they were in the NFC East with my beloved Cowboys, and used to hate to see them come to town. And then their tight end Jackie Smith, who, when we had him that one year, dropped that touchdown in the Super Bowl.
Yep. And then you had Otis Anderson with the OTTIS. They had the 2 T's. You had Dan Deerdorf and
Conrad Dobler.
Arguably the dirtiest player ever in football. Yeah. So, but and listening to those names, I mean, I go into today, and a lot of times I don't remember all those names. But you go back to the 70s and 80s, and I could tell you everybody,
Well, free agency was so different then, and guys stayed their entire careers with teams, and so it was easy to know them. Today, guys come in on their rookie contract, and then they're gone somewhere else, after that, because of how free agency is. It's the same way in baseball and basketball, right? Basketball changes players like we change underwear. So,
exactly.
It's just it's hard to do that. But, yeah, it was a huge part of our lives, and we didn't have so many other things in our lives. But, growing up and reading the newspaper and watching those NFL game of the weeks and the halftime highlights, you remembered those players' names. And then certainly anybody who was in your team's division, for me, the Cardinals, the Eagles, the Giants, and the Redskins, in that old NFC East, and it was just fighting. And the Cardinals won that division 2 years in a row.
Yep.
In 74 and 75.
They just couldn't get past anybody in the playoffs.
Yep.
So, well, we've had a great show so far, but even the better part, and I'm going to help him a second. We're going to do Penny for Your Thoughts, and I thought maybe you could do a couple of them.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. Certainly, we'd love to just share. One being last week being the anniversary of the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception, where Franco Harris caught the ball out of nowhere from Terry Bradshaw after there was a collision between Jack Tatum and Frenchie Fuqua. And like I said, Franco catches the ball, runs it in for a touchdown, and it was really what ignited the Steelers dynasty. They would lose in the playoffs next week, but it's still what triggered them. They had never won a playoff game until that day, and here Franco Harris, this rookie from Penn State, really interesting to know that here he was. They were about to celebrate 50 years from that play, and then they had also decided to retire his jersey. And unfortunately, 3 days before, we lose Franco to natural causes, 72 years old. And even as a Cowboy fan who Franco beat my Cowboys twice in Super Bowls, I had nothing but the utmost respect. When Franco Harris retired, he was number 2 all-time rusher, only behind the great Jim Brown when he retired. 9 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, including his rookie year. That's how he started his career. And a little-known fact is he wasn't even the everyday starter at Penn State.
Nope.
He split time with Lydell Mitchell, who would become a back mate in the Colts.
Yep.
And then he missed a lot of his senior year due to an injury. So the last thing he expected was to be taken in the first round by the Steelers. But it was Art Rooney, the owner, who very seldom interfered, who said this is a guy, because Chuck Noll and their scout, Bill Nunn, one of the first African-American scouts, that wasn't their choice. They wanted Mitchell.
Oh.
They thought he was a better back than Franco and everything. But the Chiefs said, no, there's something about that young man and who he is as a person that we want to bring in. And Lydell Mitchell had a nice little career, but certainly nothing to the Hall of Fame caliber of Franco Harris. And so we tip our hat to Franco. He was a tremendous man. In the community, created his own section, Franco's Italian Army, because of his heritage of being African-American father, and his mother was a native Italian that his father had met during the war. And so to be able to be just a big part of Pittsburgh and all of that. He's a New Jersey native. And he talked about he had no plans of playing college football. It was only because Paterno offered him a scholarship, and it was just so that he could get the education. He had no aspirations of going to the NFL, and look at what happened. And we almost would have missed out on a gem, more of a person, and then certainly an outstanding back. Big 6'2", 230-pound running back who had better than average agility and deceptive speed when he would get in the open.
And hence the catch.
Yes.
He had to literally bend down without falling to catch it, and then run in stride to get the touchdown
to beat the Raiders.
Yep, the Raiders. Now I will say one quick thing. The reason why he was there in that position was because Joe Paterno, as Franco said, when the person has the ball, you're supposed to run to the ball. So if you watch that play, and he was supposed to block, as Terry Bradshaw said, did a horrible job of it. He was standing there, but once he realized where he was throwing it, he took off down the field. And if he had not done that, the ball would have just still landed.
Well, I was listening to him recapture that moment with the Raider linebacker, Phil Villapiano.
Yep.
And Villapiano still says he was clipped on the play.
Yes, he does.
And so had he been 1 second earlier or 1 second late, the immaculate reception never happens. To your point of him, I got to go do something. The ball is away. Get downfield and hustle and try to see what you can do to be a part of the play. Don't just be a spectator. Get involved. But I hate the fact that he did not get to celebrate that moment.
I agree.
Openly, and then how his number wasn't retired years ago amazes me. In one of the best run organizations in all of football, and I know they're slow to retire numbers.
And I get that.
Yeah.
I get that.
I get it, right? Sometimes I think we retire numbers too fast, right?
Well,
the Yankees ain't going to have no numbers left.
I mean, look, what he did to Pittsburgh was the same way Lynn Dawson did to Kansas City, and they didn't wait forever to retire his number.
Yeah.
You know, but they waited way too long. It should have been years ago.
It's the same way. Like the Cowboys don't retire numbers;
Right.
they just take them out of circulation.
Right.
They've never officially retired anyone, not
Right.
even Lily's number.
Right.
But nobody's ever worn 74. Nobody's worn 12 since Staubach, and they have held on to number 8.
Yep.
To like that. But they've also had players that have worn the same number that actually wound up in the Ring of Honor in Dallas. Number 54,
Yep.
Chuck Howley,
Randy White.
You know,
Yep.
so it's a pretty unique situation with Drew Pearson and Michael Irvin in the '88 club.
Right. Right.
Bob Hayes and Emmitt Smith in 22, like that. So it's been interesting. But the Steelers, you couldn't have told me that Franco Harris's number wasn't already retired by the Steelers.
Right. I thought that because you didn't really see anybody wear 32.
No.
So you thought, okay, it's already retired.
But I guess I should have known because it was a long time before they retired Joe Green's number.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a few years back, and
Right.
I remember that just because of the fact Joe Green's from my hometown, and
Right.
so and they finally retired his number. But it just Franco's still their all-time leading rusher, you
Yeah.
know, and he's I want to say like number 14 or 15 all-time now.
Right.
But it was just amazing, and then here you have this celebration, and it's just another reminder of us of the frailty of life, and we need to give people their flowers while they can still smell them.
Absolutely. So, and I'm going to cut you off real quick so you can do your other penny for your thoughts.
My other penny for your thoughts is going out to LeBron James, about to pass Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but what he was able to do on his birthday, to have a triple-double on his birthday at age 38 in his 20th season. I will forever say that we have not appreciated this man and the gem that he is to basketball, to humanity, and what he's done in the community in Akron where he grew up. And so if things go right, he'll be passing Kareem here. And so I'm going to encourage people, set your DVRs because it's going to be a long time before somebody else passes that. And so with that, we take our hat off to him, and we'll continue to pray for DeMar Hamlin and his family as he's on the road to recovery, but I'm sure there's still a lot of things.
Absolutely. And would you like to talk about your Kappa Alpha?
Yeah, we're going to send just a quick shout out to all of the brothers across the land in my beloved fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi. Today we celebrate 112 years of achievement in every field of human endeavor and in excellence. I'm going to go hang out with a few of the guys when I leave here. And so we say yo to everybody.
Absolutely. So we've had a great show and great honor, and mention again Pele. You know, I mean, you can't say enough. I mean, what Frankel Harris and Lynn Dawson did to their respected towns, he did to a nation. I mean, he, brought World Cup soccer alive. He also brought it to the United States, who is still screwing it up today. And we won't get into that. We'll keep it positive, but it was still that he was just a phenomenal athlete. I don't know if anybody will ever win 3 World Cups. He did it twice as a captain, which is even more impressive. So these men that passed away just at the end of 2022, we give their absolute honor.
Yeah, and also we were talking about 50 years of the Immaculate Reception. This December 31st was also 50 years from when we lost Roberto Clemente, going to Nicaragua to render aid to earthquake victims, and one of our greatest baseball players that we've ever seen. And trying to help other people, and gave his life 50 years ago, 1972, December 31st.
Absolutely. Great loss. So with that, George Walker behind the scenes, and Coach 24, my brother with another mother, Darwin Penny. I am Brian Kress, the Awesome Voice. This is Any Given Sunday, and you guys have yourself a great football weekend.